Hello and welcome everyone once again to yet another fantastic episode for Crypto Economy Talks. At Crypto Economy Talks, as you all know, we bring the who's who of crypto economy world, the movers and shakers who are really building and shaping this industry for the good of the wider world. We have today with us Hans from Coinify. He's the COO, but more importantly, Hans has an amazing background of working with regulators since the inception of crypto world. And for last 7 or 8 years, he has done significant work with number of regulatory bodies all around the world, trying to bring everyone together and work on the regulatory aspect. So a lot of discussions around regulations today and regulations in the future, but at the same time, he will be sharing his view of where crypto economy is today, where is it likely to head, and how it's going to impact each one of us. So on that note, Hans, welcome to the show, Crypto Economy Talks. If you can please tell us a brief about yourself and your company.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Bhavin. Yeah, just briefly, I'm a tech person from the upbringing. I spent more than a decade with IBM and Oracle, and worked with e-commerce and some of the first financial transactions on the internet. But since 2007, I've been building companies, and one of them is Coinify, which we have been building since I think it was around 2013. It was my business partner Mark who introduced me to Bitcoin at that time, and I found it. I think I discarded like everyone else. I don't know if you did as well, Bhavin, but I discarded it. I think it was around $6 at that time, but got back into it at $25, so quite early on, and saw that there was something here, and actually more or less immediately started working with peers in the industry. Identified two companies. One was Bitcoin Internet Payment System that was a pioneer in merchant acceptance, and the other one was a company doing remittances to the Philippines called Nordic Bitcoin Bitcoin Nordic. And we decided to merge those two companies. In principle, because on the merchant acceptance side, you have an inflow of cryptocurrencies, and on the trading side, you mostly have selling of cryptocurrencies. So we saw an opportunity to merge those two companies and in principle bring together an inside liquidity pool where we did not need to go to exchanges and trade off the difference, but in principle could accept the cryptocurrencies from merchant payments and then sell it to consumers. And that business grew successfully over a course of many years. And I think we are active in 150 countries now. We are probably a well-known company today. We service some of the biggest providers in the world, either exclusively or together with others. So we do both on and off ramp in terms of getting in and out of crypto. But we also service payment service providers and merchants on a global scale with accepting cryptocurrencies as means of payments for products. We've also been pioneering central bank digital currencies with Signum, a Swiss bank, and we're also into, let's say, many other new technologies in this space. We were recently acquired by Voyager Digital, which is a very successful company. That is, and in principle, Coinify is now part of the Voyager group, which we are very happy about.
Awesome. Congrats on that one. And help us picture us a future for us. What will be the future in 10 years' time? How would the crypto economy look? Today, it is roughly around 5% of the world economy. What's likely going to be the share in 10 years' time? And where would you see crypto in everyday life for most people?
Well, one thing that is fortunate coming of age is that you have experience. And I was part of the journey with the internet. I clearly remember in 1994 and 5 when HTML came around and suddenly transformed what was at that point the internet. We worked with it at IBM, and suddenly with HTML, you could see that this was actually useful for something. You can make a website. But I mean, at that time, nobody really thought about this as a digital disruption, right? I mean, what is a digital disruption? I mean, certain requirements are there in order to let's say, call it a digital disruption. And one of them is that you need to take a physical product and make it digital. In this case, it's value, right? I mean, we are taking value, which we would normally consider a physical product, and making it into a digital version. And we know from the music industry, for instance, that that has massive impact. I mean, we can talk about digital music, but when things went away from a physical product to an digital format, it changed the music industry entirely, right? I mean, completely. We know now that internet did to books and publishing and like the entire let's say photography industry, how that has changed, telephony and so on and so forth. So I think what we can say is that in 10 years' time, we will not be able to recognize our own world, because if we move back to 95, we were not able to predict where we are sitting today, right? In terms of how we are using the internet, how disruptive it was. And I think we're dealing with the same time of paradigm shift. I can tell you it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be what we think. And we might have some theories, but it's a vastly complex system. And we will not be able to call the Google of the future. We will not. I remember Google. I mean, we were using Alta Vista. We were happy with Alta Vista, and then Google came along, but nobody took Google serious. Now we take Google serious, right? So I will not predict the future, but I can tell you it will be vastly different from what you know today, especially for the financial services industry.
Awesome. Look, I also believe that, in any case, when the new thing comes up in the start, people tend to see old world, new world, right? You see, internet world, which was online, and then there was something called offline. And today online and offline has almost amalgamated seamlessly. I don't even know how much hour of my day I'm actually online and how much hours of day I'm actually offline. It's very difficult to segregate. And I think that's what I foresee with normal economy and crypto economy also in future would be very difficult to segregate between the two. It's one and the same and probably everywhere. But on that note, right, 2008, when Satoshi Nakamoto, he, she, they, whosoever they were, came up with this paper, this brilliant paper about Bitcoin, right? But if you read the essence of paper, the whole objective of the paper was fighting the capitalist, imperialistic capitalist world and coming up with a common man's currency, which is not governed by any particular government, and the control is decentralized, right? And anyone can transfer money to anyone. There was a huge freedom of expression associated with that. And the whole baseline was that it is supposed to be a common man's currency. If I now see today, I rarely see Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency as actually a common man's currency. It seems to be more converted into the same imperialistic capitalist society converted it into a rich man's asset class. How do you see this as being part of the crypto economy world? Has this turned into merely an asset class, or does it still hold a value as a currency?
I think that in order to answer that question, you need to look at a society, right? Because in principle, everything is just reflected by the society. And in the case of what you're saying, that it was meant to be free for established in some sort of nirvana, I mean, I don't know who believed that at that point. I remember when I got into crypto, I met some of those people who thought that they could somehow establish a society which was separate from the rest of the world. And I don't think that, at least that was my take on it. Very early on, I could see that this technology holds a lot of promises, but you cannot disconnect things from our society. I mean, we live in a place, we are physically grounded. I live in Denmark, we have certain rules in Denmark, and that's just how it is. And if you want to live in Denmark, then you adhere to certain rules. You're part of a society, and the society has actually decided that this is how we want to live, because we have elected politicians who have made the rules in our society. Now, trying to disconnect what we now call value, money, currency, or asset from rules and regulation in your country is not going to be a very, let's say, entertaining thought, because eventually the society is going to tell you to go and live somewhere else, because we have decided on certain rules. So so if you recognize that those things are connected, you can say, of course, you could also expect that we would end up where we are, in the sense that you can say it's not maybe for the common man, but it's also for the common man. And I think that is where the promise of Satoshi holds true, is that potentially this can still bring the 3.6 billion people, or how many it is, into and be included in the global economy, which would benefit everyone. So I think that there is a lot of promise still, or let's say potential, still to be unlocked in Satoshi's vision, and hopefully we will, as a company ourselves and everyone else, will help release that potential. We can see it in Coinify. We can see users who have never been able to get a bank account. They are now able to do financial transactions. We recently introduced a payment card. Now imagine how easy it is now to establish yourself with an account, get your earnings in crypto, and then be part of the society using a payment card with the traditional financial system. And I think that's important to recognize. Now, when you say currency or asset, that is exactly what is beautiful about this technology, is because we're probably going to have that conversation for the next decade, and that's part of the very important phase of accepting this new theme, is that you want to compare it with something you know. What do you know? You know what currency is, you know what an asset is, and the same goes for regulators. They would like to box it in, even though it's this elusive technology, we still need to box it in.
Yeah. And very spot on with that, right? Because if we call it currency, then we have a problem, because there are roughly 200 countries in this world, but number of currencies are even less, because most of them are using one or the other to dominating currency, or are even pegged to it. So the real currencies are actually very less, right? And now all of a sudden, if you look at a crypto market, there are at least 13,000 coins and minimum 50 odd coming every single day. So then how do you keep a track? And fair point. But I do agree with you that when it comes to regulatory side, at least the significant issue that we have with policymakers across the world and people trying to get their head right is, since the evolution of money, and when the gold got converted into a proper currency, a promissory note instead of a valuable gold, right? This is probably that level of transformation that is coming to money. And our current struggle is exactly what you have said, that we all are trying to fit this new thing within our understanding of last 100 years of how it operates. The fact of the matter is, what we have now is so significantly different that anything that we know of past may just not apply. Example, when we went into money, we started actually using an accounting system, right? Only 7% of the world money is actually in form of a currency note or a physical note. Everything else is just a ledger entry. And when you go to blockchain and when you go to crypto side, that is very different. You're actually transferring money. You're not settling a ledger account between the two entities. The value is getting transferred. Right? So to your point, absolutely agree that we need to rethink separately. So share with us, how has been your journey with this regulatory thinking and evolution of this thinking as you have witnessed?
I think it has been the same journey as with everyone else, as well as myself. I mean, I think everybody starts with this notion that when they hear about Bitcoin, because that's what they hear about, right? I mean, that's the first thing. Then they immediately associate it with a pyramid scheme of somehow. And then they find out this Satoshi is behind the pyramid. So they only enforce that this is just something hoax. Some might compare it to the tulip bubble and other things, but I think everybody gets to a point where they say, oh, the storyline goes like, this is anonymous, and this in principle is not traceable, and then this must be for criminals. So you in principle discard it and you put it in a bucket, and that's how the brain works. I mean, when we see something new, we're lazy people, right? So we try to see if there is a way where we should not really spend time understanding this, because we know it's complicated, right? So we just put it in a box, and it's a very convenient box, by the way. It's for criminals, right? And I think we have all been there. We know certain regulators are still there. If that's not a possibility, or if you in principle study a bit more, you're going to find out that this is actually quite an innovative technology solution to a real problem, and it's actually solved. And at that point, when you have your Heruka moment, then you start your next phase, and that is an acceptance phase. But in order for us as humans to accept something, we need to relate it to something we know, and we go through the journey. I will compare this to a currency, and then somebody's going to tell you, it's not really a currency because you're actually digging and you're mining and you're getting something out of it. It's more like digital gold. And then, okay, it's digital gold. Let's put it in that box, right? I think it was it Saxo Bank that listed Bitcoin as one of the first, let's say, real world CFD exchanges. And they listed it as was it BTCX, like AUX, and like silver and gold, right? Because that's the relation that they expected. Until someone tells you that actually it's not just a currency, it's actually also a built-in payment rail. And then people are saying, what? I mean, you're saying it's a bearer financial instrument, but there is a built-in payment settlement network underneath. What is that settlement network? That's called the blockchain, right? And then people are going through this journey. Regulators are the same, right? So I think I got engaged with I think we established our working group, which is called the Blockchain and Virtual Currency Working Group, together with Michael Grønager, who's the founder of Chainalysis. So Coinify and Chainalysis took the initiative to found a group to work with regulators on finding an amicable way of regulating this new industry. And we have been in conversation with regulators since, I think, 2015, maybe, provided a lot of input for the fifth anti-money laundering directive. And but during that journey, we, of course, took all these, let's say, politicians and commission members through the same journey, because that's what they're interested to hear.
So Hans, you also mentioned your company works closely on CBDCs as well. It would be great if you can share some views on what is happening to the world of CBDCs. A lot of discussion. There was also in between a lot of discussion about Libra as one of the new currencies. Where have all these discussions gone, or how much progress has been made?
No, I think CBDCs is definitely here to stay. I mean, it's not going away. So we need to recognize that there is a need from central banks to, let's say, find a way of how to provide for better product. And I think that that everybody now understand that there is a technology now which makes it available to solve certain problems that classical financial instruments at least have not been able to solve. And I think that therefore we will have some sort of central bank digital currency coming, and we will need to deal with it. I'm more, let's say, suspicious about how would it then transform our society, how will it actually be implemented, and that's the next.
Awesome. What is happening to Libra? Is that still going on? Is that still in discussion? Because that was supposed to be a revolutionary thought in the world of currency.
Of course, you can say it's always in the making, and I would still say that it looks more like a paper tiger nowadays. And I think the initial, let's say, ambitions that Facebook has or had has been somewhat limited in terms of ability to execute. I still think that Facebook as a technology company is just attacking this technology theme as everybody else wants to do. It's an opportunity to solve big problems, right? So why not use the technology to solve big problems? So I actually respect that Facebook is taking the initiative, but it also shows how difficult it is to implement these types of new.
Hans, help us understand. With new technology comes new risk, right? So while a lot of people are simply talking about misuse of this, but there could be some inherent risk to the wider economy, to the user. And what would you see as the risk of using blockchain, using cryptocurrencies? What is the real risk, or any new risk that we are not aware of?
I think there is a lot of risk, and I think everyone needs to be respectful of the risks that are in our industry, both in terms of that this is a bearer instrument. So if you have the private keys and you're not able to protect them, then you're gonna end up with a potential problem, right? But I think we also need to recognize from the classical financial industry that they also see certain risks. If a lot of people suddenly start moving their funds out of the classical financial industry and put it into something as cryptocurrencies, are they or are we as a society changing how the rule book works? And I think what we have seen over time is that financial regulators, they have actually not seen this as an immediate risk. It's a small niche, and that's why everybody has just accepted that it's there. But as it has grown into a $1 trillion market, then that view also changes, right? Because then potentially this could actually represent a greater risk to the classical financial industry. And I think with Facebook's introduction of Libra, that was exactly where the dial was moved a little bit too much on the volume dial. And the MiCA regulation that we are implementing now in Europe is a direct, let's say, reaction to Facebook's initiative. That's very.
And I think beyond just regulating the economy and asset class, I think there's also a lot of impact on potential capital gains through a completely different asset class, which you don't necessarily recognize as a security. And hence, if you end up having a capital gain, at what point do you recognize and how do you pay tax on it? And if people are going to move at least portion of their wealth in this space, and that's technically a tax revenue loss for many government. And that's also a significant impact, which is driving decisions at many governments today.
No, I don't think tax is such a big issue. I mean, tax authorities, they know that eventually you are grounded to the real world and they know how to find you. And I think one of the things that at least was very entertaining when we had the conversation with regulators was that this was exactly their worry. They were in the early stage, right? They thought this was for criminals and anonymous. And of course, together with chain analysis, we proved that we could actually track quite a lot of information about any transaction. And immediately they went actually to the other end of the scale and saying, well, couldn't this actually be an integrated taxational system where we can build in VAT and just program the money? And we said, sure, that is possible, but just be aware that any employer who's paying out, let's say, money in this type of technology would also know exactly what the employee is spending their money on, because there would also be traceability into the future. And they thought that the traceability was just in the past. And immediately within the same conversation, you go for, this is anonymous for criminals, to the opposite, oh my God, this is Big Brother watching me, right? So it has been very entertaining to have this conversation with regulators, because with this new technology, you can see how their eyes open up as they go through the journey, as we all do, until, of course, they find out that, of course, it's not the solution to all problems. I mean, we will not save all the tuna fish in the world with using blockchain, even though somebody might be telling us. We know now that that's not going to be the case.
So, Hans, one last question. With all the policymakers, looking at this entire crypto economy, the speed at which it is rising, are obviously trying to figure out ways to govern. With your experience and on ground as well as dealing with regulators, what will be your key message to all of them?
I think they're doing the right thing, by the way. I think they are, at least the European legislation is providing for space. And I think one of the early worries for the crypto industry was that eventually a government will come with a big hammer and make everything illegal. That is very, very unlikely now. We have an estimated 100,000 new people joining the cryptocurrency industry every single day. Now, it will be impossible to ban something which is so widely used. So that's not going to be the case. And I actually respect regulators from having the conversation with industry peers. You can say we also have FATF in US. There has been some criticism about their approach and their maybe they're bringing out a little hammer, but to be fair, it's not a big hammer. I mean, they're also allowing this space to evolve and to innovate and bring forward new solutions to old problems. And I think we should respect that as industry peers. But we need to be in dialogue with regulators. And I think the approach that we have taken in the blockchain working group, at least in Europe, is that we try to provide data, we try to provide insight. The latest conversation is, of course, about the environment, where there is also a complete oblivious view that cryptocurrency is really bad for the environment, without even separating how electricity is produced and how it's consumed, right? So now we are in dialogue providing regulators with information so they actually understand that it's more than 70% of all energy usage in our industry, which comes from renewable energies and does not have the, let's say, the CO2 impact that people think, or an energy impact that people think. And I think it's our duty as an industry to engage in that dialogue, but do it from a sound perspective, data-driven, and let's say entertain that conversation, and then also respect that there is another side to the coin, and we need, as we live in a society, to find a balance between things.
Awesome. Hans, thank you for joining us today. Very insightful. And at the same time, I must say, looking forward to a crypto-enabled future for all of us. And all the best to you and all the best to Coinify. You guys are definitely helping play a very important role in this growing crypto economy and probably making it much more safer and giving much more comfort to people on how this entire transactions are happening. So thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today.
It was a pleasure, Bhavin.